My name is Darren Day, and I work for the State Department of Ecology, and I actually lead a team that doesn't do work at this scale very often. We do Puget Sound scale recovery planning, which means we talk to other bureaucrats and we speak in sentences that are usually more acronyms than actual words. But I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk to people who do care about a resource. So we're here talking to a lake district, so that's you. And also to talk about real things that real people can do, as opposed to how we should have big strategic planning structures and agencies should work together. This is a really satisfying kind of thing to do. It's also really kind of near and dear to me because I grew up on a small lake in what was, at the time, rural King County, is now suburban Sproul King County, and I can't even really bring myself to go visit the lake that I grew up on. But it's also the same lake that my mom grew up on. My grandma lived 7 houses down from us. And it was a really unique opportunity that really instilled a deep, deep passion for fish and wildlife in me. So I got, what's that?
What lake?
It was Lake Lucerne. It's connected to Pipe Lake. Really great little place. But that was a really, really important and foundational thing for me, was the fish and wildlife that I got to interact with as a kid. Like, that had a huge impact on me. I mean, I now work for the Department of Ecology. Go figure. But today we're going to talk a little bit about what folks like you can do on a lake like Lake Lawrence to help protect fish and wildlife. So you all are actually pretty lucky. When you think about a lake like this, you don't have some of those same really heavy suburban sprawl pressures that are probably one of the worst things that can happen with the ecosystem. So your challenges are going to look like things like stormwater, and I'm probably not going to be telling you anything you don't know. Stormwater, pollution from septic systems, and how we choose to manage our lakefront property, so what that actual fish and wildlife habitat looks like. Fish and wildlife are pretty simple. They really need a couple things. They need healthy habitat, clean water. If we can pull that off, usually the fish and the wildlife will be all right. So with some place like Lake Lawrence, when I'm thinking about clean water, what I'm thinking about, again, things like natural yard care, like the way that we choose to manage our landscaping. Other things that are really, really impactful, one of them is really honestly septic maintenance. That's a huge issue in some of these rural lakes. Again, probably not telling you anything you don't know. I'm also the proud owner of a septic system. I know how much of a hassle it can be. And then lastly, when it comes to clean water, thinking about stormwater runoff, that can have a huge impact on our resources. Luckily, when you look at a watershed like this isn't very heavily impacted. You've got a couple of communities here, but it's not like you've got urbanization kind of encroaching on the entire watershed here. So honestly, you're in pretty good shape. Speaking as an environmental planner, not an engineer or scientist, I won't qualify that. But those are the kind of the main water quality impacts that we should be thinking about in a situation like this. And then when it comes to habitat, I think the most important thing we can think about is how we manage our shorelines. And that includes what kind of landscaping we do, whether we choose to armor or rebuild armor. Those types of things will have an impact on fish and wildlife habitat and quality. So those are the primary challenges. There's also a lot that you can do as a lakefront landowner, as a resident or citizen. When it comes to landscaping and how we put chemicals on our lawns, fertilizing, those types of things, natural yard care, making different decisions about what kind of landscaping we use. A lot of the kind of traditional landscaping that we see, it's not really very friendly to fish and wildlife. It looks really nice. Sometimes it's easier to maintain, but not always. But there are a lot of resources to help folks think about how to think about different types of landscaping that you could do that help with fish and wildlife habitat. GrowSmart, GrowSafe.org is a really great one. I could give you all sorts of URLs that you could follow, but your Google machine is probably very, very well suited to help you find some of these resources as well. So looking them up, but natural yard care, making sure that we're cleaning up our pet waste in our yards, because that all eventually will run off into the water, and also different fish and wildlife use those kind of near shore spaces. They're really important for a lot of fish and wildlife. When it comes to septic maintenance and replacement, this is, of course, a really fun one to talk about. Making sure you're getting your systems pumped out, making sure they're functional. If they do need to be replaced, there are different types of septic systems, maybe even thinking about like an evapotranspiration system that doesn't actually put runoff into the water. There are different options for some of those septic systems. Of course, in all of these lakefront situations, it's not always easy to fit a good septic system. There are problems with that, of course. But there are also resources for folks. So one of the ones I think is probably really important is there are low interest loans for folks who do find that their septic systems are failing. Craft 3 is a great resource for that. When it comes to stormwater, I think one of the things that folks can be doing is thinking about their own runoff, doing things like building rain gardens, disconnecting downspouts. A lot of the development that we did in the past was really aimed at getting water off-site. So when we think about stormwater management, that was the goal, was get it away, get it out of here, and in more recent thinking, what we're trying to do is actually keep water on-site. We're trying to infiltrate it, and things like rain gardens, which are really pretty simple. It's essentially a depression with some compost and sand mix in it and some nice plants. They can have a tremendous impact on water quality. We've even found, I'm not sure if folks are familiar, that tires actually put off a incredibly toxic byproduct that will kill coho. It's one of the most deadly compounds that we know, one of the most deadly aquatic toxicants that we've found.
Tires, is that what you said?
Tires, yes, sir. But a simple rain garden, so that compost and sand is actually fully effective at reducing the toxicity of that. So I doubt that you're going to be getting big kind of washes off the roadway through your own yard and into the lake, and they're probably not going to find coho out here. But those are really effective systems, and they can address some of the most problematic toxics that we have, and they can really help with stormwater runoff. When it comes to kind of creating healthier, more fish and wildlife friendly shorelines, there is a really great program called Shore Friendly. I'm not sure if folks are familiar. It's run through the Thurston Conservation District, and it's based on the idea that we want to provide resources to homeowners to be able to make good decisions and help them build healthier shorelines, because it's not always easy to do that. And kind of to bring my story a little bit full circle, speaking of the Shore Friendly program, so I used to work at the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. When I worked there, I worked for a grant program. And through that grant program, what we were trying to do is find ways to really turn the tide for shoreline armoring. And what we were able to do was use my mom's experience with her failing bulkhead to build an entire program of homeowner supports that would help people do the right thing when they wanted to. My mom ran into the situation where she brought the city out, the planning and development folks said, you're never going to be able to get a permit to do any of this. And she's like, but I actually want to remove my bulkhead, I want to regrade it, I want it to be pretty, I want nice native plants. And they were like, I don't know, figure it out. And so we took that experience and we really built that whole program for that Shore Friendly program around that experience. There are people who want to do the right thing, they want to invest in fish and wildlife habitat on their own property, and there are barriers. So we want to be able to remove those barriers and provide the supports. So when I think about fish and wildlife, I think there are two things that it is intrinsically, inherently important thing, especially in my mind as an avid fisher person and hunter. But the other thing that I think is really important about fish and wildlife is, for me, that it really created having that really close relationship with fish and wildlife. I was fishing almost every day as a kid. That really set a course for me that ended up putting me on this track where I wanted to do environmental policy and I wanted to help fish and wildlife, and it brought it full circle. And that ability to interact with those fish and wildlife and having it as a kid was what really, it's why we're talking about a program like Shore Friendly today. So trying to protect those and also trying to share those with upcoming generations, because that, it might be your grandkid, it might be your own children, who's really inspired by that, and it might help create that next generation of environmental managers and advocates and programs and support and help in a world where, you know, the environment, you usually get these negative feedback loops where, you know, things start to fall apart and then it makes another thing fall apart and another thing falls apart. Then all of a sudden the whole system is just totally out of whack. This is an opportunity that we actually have to create a positive feedback loop. And I think that that is really powerful and important. So I want to say thanks to everybody. And if folks have questions, our email addresses at the Department of Ecology are very simple. It would be derek.day@ety.wa.gov. So I can help answer questions. I can put folks in touch with other resources. But again, I just want to say a big thank you to Barry for inviting me and all of you for listening to me talk about something I'm very passionate about. So thank you all, and cool. I really, really appreciate it.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
You talked about armor and rebuild armor.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What do you mean by that?
So like shoreline armoring, so, you know, bulkheads,
okay.
you know, those can be concrete, sometimes they're made out of wood or rocks.
Okay.
But those actually really interrupt the way that those shoreline environments where kind of the land meets the water are particularly important for a lot of species. And when we put up a wall, we create a very unnatural environment that makes it really hard for a lot of those to thrive.
Okay, got it. And so better for planting shrubs, you know, or, you know, water-friendly
Exactly.
Plants, you know, near there.
Yeah, and armoring is a really traditional way to deal with that interface between the water and the land. A lot of people are worried about erosion. A lot of people, it's like a landscaping amenity. It also creates a lot of problems, not only for the environment, but, you know, growing up as a kid, it made it a lot harder. We had that bulkhead. It made it a lot harder to get in and out of the water. With small children, it can be deadly if kids get in the water and then can't get out. So, you know, resloping, regrading those shorelines into what they would look like more naturally is a way to also have better access to the water.
At the practical level,
Yeah.
I'm scared to death to invite any county person onto my property.
Actually, something when we were creating that whole shore friendly program, we thought about a lot. And a lot of those programs, when they got kind of moved out to that county level, they're actually housed in conservation districts. And the conservation districts don't have that same regulatory role. They are there for technical assistance. They're there to help landowners. And even at the state, we understand that that conservation district is intended to be kind of that third party, somebody you could talk to without the regulatory hammer hiding in their back pocket. So that would be my suggestion. If you have things you want to work on.
So that's like a separate county entity with
It is a separate county
locked
entity.
doors so the rest of the county can't come in?
With its own elected board. Your two best resources are going to be that conservation district and also some of the WSU extensions. They have folks, and again, that's very intentionally separate, so that people can have frank conversations without being too worried.
Okay, thank you.
So much of the lake is, and where the water meets the land, is a lot of muck and sediment, and you know, you talk about a safety issue with a kid who falls off a bulkhead and can't get back out. You know, in some places, if you try to walk out in the water, you're going to be this high up, you know, in mud, and you're stuck. Is there some okay way to correct that problem, or is that a problem that can be fixed in a way that?
That's a complicated one. I mean, you might be able to get something like a dredging permit, but the layers of red tape that something like that would take would be, whew, that scares me, and I know about permitting. So.
I think we looked into it, you know, several years ago, and it was millions upon millions of dollars, and that was one of the things I think.
But I just meant though, as a homeowner.
No, it's
on your own personal property, right?
It's a good question. Like growing up, we had neighbors that would dump truckfuls of gravel into the water, but you know, it would get sedimented over. It's also very not allowed. But, yeah, I think that one's a really hard one to solve. The only thing I could really think about is if, and doesn't seem to me, just at first glance, that there might be like excessive sedimentation issues with runoff coming into the lake.
Yeah, our lake got hit real hard, Derek. That's why I sent you that history video. In the late 1850s, we had 2 logging sawmills on the lake. They pushed all their debris into the lake.
Yeah.
Their logs were in the lake, all the bark came off in the lake. And then from 1908 to 1928, we had the diversion of the Deschutes River into Lake Lawrence to take care of the electric power plant in Tumwater for the city of Olympia.
Yeah.
And our lake was 45 foot deep in 1908. By 1928, it was 25 foot deep. All the sediment came into the lake from the Deschutes River over that 20-some year period.
And that is no way out.
And it had no way out. Similar to Capitol Lake, you know, it's happened down there.
Yeah.
So all the sediment flowed from the south end of the lake all the way across. And this end of the lake, out to those buoys out there, is only about 5 foot deep. What basically happened is the west side of our lake on both basins
Yeah.
is very shallow. The east side of the lakes, because the water flowed this way, is deeper. It's 20, 25 foot deep at the deepest point. So all that sediment from those years of the Deschutes River being channeled into the lake has caused a muck problem, some people refer to.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would impact the entire way that the lake functions. Like,
It
it would
does.
make it hard for it to have kind of the natural turnover cycles that
Yeah.
cycle nutrients, which probably also helps contribute to the,
Yeah.
the phosphorus issue and the toxicology.
Yeah, we have 87% in sediment phosphorus, 87%, so.
Well, I mean, honestly, that sounds like something as a group, you all might want to be talking to different agencies about this needing a remediation
Yeah.
project from that historical logging.
Right.
Because this lake isn't working like it should.
Right.
So, I mean, what's that?
Welcome to our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think if we knew what path to take, you know, we have people who would push for it, but we constantly hear, well, dredging will solve a lot of it, and then we'll also solve, you know, the weed problem and whatnot, but that's not an option for us from a
the cost.
dollar,
Yeah.
cost and a permitting, and
We're talking over $250 million to
Yeah.
dredge this lake over a period of 3 to 5 years.
Really, but I mean, this is really the crux, like, this is what I spend this problem is what I spend most of my time on working. This is my day job to think about these kind of things. That's the scale that we usually think about, is like, what is it gonna take to restore an entire, like, across the Puget Sound region? It's gonna restore something, and one of my biggest takeaways, I think, from learning how much it actually does cost. So if we think about just like stream restoration and stormwater, King County did a study in 2009, and they had a number that pegged it, and this is $2,009, not adjusted for inflation, not adjusted for property, differences in property values. It was gonna cost between $12 and $14 billion a year for 30 years.
How much?
Just to 12 to 13 billion, or 12 to 14 billion.
Billion.
Billion, the B. Puget Sound wide. Like, that's not a number, it's like, essentially, it's $11 billion. It's a nonsense number.
Brazilian.
Yeah, yeah.